Imagine a world where warriors wielded weapons so advanced, so deadly, they could shift the balance of entire empires. Yet these weren't the creations of modern science, but the brilliant innovations of ancient minds. We often picture the distant past as a time of primitive tools and simple warfare, but the truth is far more astonishing. Ancient civilizations engineered weapons of such cunning and brutality, they'd make even today's military strategists pause in awe. From fire that clung to flesh like a living nightmare to siege engines capable of smashing through fortress walls, these weren't just tools of war, they were masterpieces of ingenuity designed to dominate the battlefield and leave a legacy of terror. Think about this, some of history's most devastating weapons weren't born in the age of gunpowder or steel, but in the hands of engineers who worked with bronze, wood, and sheer creativity. These weren't just crude instruments, they were the cutting-edge technology of their time, born from desperation, ambition, and sometimes pure genius. Picture a weapon so feared, its mere mention could send armies fleeing, or a device so precise it could strike down enemies from impossible distances. These weren't myths, they were real, and they changed the course of history. Today, we're uncovering 30 of these extraordinary weapons, each one a testament to the dark brilliance of ancient warfare. Some were so effective, their designs were kept secret for centuries. Others remain shrouded in mystery, their full capabilities still debated by historians. But one thing's certain, these weren't just tools for killing. They were symbols of power engineered to intimidate, outthink, and outlast the enemy. So prepare to step onto the battlefield of the past, where every weapon tells a story of innovation, survival, and the relentless pursuit of victory. The ancient world was far more advanced than you ever realized, and what you're about to discover will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about history's greatest warriors. Greek fire stands as one of history's most terrifying and enigmatic weapons, a liquid inferno that defied the laws of nature. Developed by the Byzantine Empire, this incendiary nightmare could cling to ships, ignite on water, and even burn beneath the waves, making it the ultimate naval weapon of its time. Picture the horror of enemy fleets watching helplessly as flames spread uncontrollably across the sea, swallowing their wooden vessels whole. The mere sight of Byzantine ships equipped with Greek fire was often enough to send invaders fleeing before a single shot was fired. What made this weapon so devastating wasn't just its firepower, but its mystery. The exact recipe was a closely guarded state secret, known only to a select few Byzantine engineers. To this day, historians still debate its composition. Some believe it contained a volatile mix of naphtha, a crude form of petroleum, combined with quicklime, a substance that reacts violently with water, intensifying the flames. Others suggest sulfur or pine resin might have been added to make the fire stick to targets like molten tar. Whatever the formula, its effectiveness was undeniable. Greek fire played a crucial role in defending Constantinople for centuries, turning the tide in battles against Arab fleets during sieges that could have toppled the empire. But the true genius of Greek fire lay in its delivery. The Byzantines used pressurized bronze tubes known as siphons to spray the flaming liquid in an arc toward enemy ships, creating walls of fire that were nearly impossible to escape. Some accounts even describe handheld versions used like ancient flamethrowers to repel boarders. Unlike ordinary fire, which could be doused with water, Greek fire burned fiercer when wet, leaving sailors with no way to fight back. The psychological impact was just as powerful as the physical destruction. The weapon became a symbol of Byzantine ingenuity and unstoppable force. What's fascinating is how modern we can still see echoes of Greek fire in today's warfare. From napalm to thermobaric weapons, the concept of fire as an unquenchable weapon of terror persists. Yet none have matched the sheer mystique of the Byzantine original, a secret so well kept that we may never fully uncover its formula. Greek fire didn't just win battles, it shaped history, proving that sometimes the most fearsome weapons aren't just about brute force but the terror of the unknown. While Greek fire dominated the seas, on land the Romans perfected a weapon of terrifying precision, the Scorpion. This wasn't just any siege engine, it was a masterpiece of mechanical warfare, a torsion-powered ballista so accurate it could pick off individual soldiers from hundreds of yards away. Picture a crossbow scaled up to monstrous proportions, capable of launching heavy iron-tipped bolts or stone projectiles with enough force to punch through shields, armor, and even fortress walls. The Scorpion didn't just kill, it terrorized, turning battlefields into shooting galleries where no enemy was safe. What set the Scorpion apart was its engineering. Unlike earlier catapults that relied on tension or counterweights, this weapon used twisted skeins of sinew or horsehair to store incredible energy. When released, these bundles unwound with violent speed, launching projectiles at velocities that could reach over 150 miles per hour. The Romans refined the design to eliminate wasted movement, ensuring every ounce of power went into the shot. Some accounts describe Scorpions hitting targets the size of a man at nearly 500 paces, a feat that would challenge even modern snipers. Julius Caesar knew the psychological edge these machines gave him. During the Gallic Wars, he deployed Scorpions not just as siege weapons but as battlefield artillery, breaking enemy charges before they could even begin. At the Siege of Alesia, his engineers positioned Scorpions atop earthen ramparts, raining down death on Gaulish warriors attempting to breach Roman lines. The bolts were so massive they could skewer multiple men in a single shot, leaving survivors demoralized and scattered. Caesar himself wrote about their devastating effect, noting how entire tribes hesitated to attack once they saw the Scorpion's range. But the true brilliance of the Scorpion lay in its versatility. Mounted on wheeled carriages, it could be repositioned mid-battle to exploit weak points in enemy formations. In sieges, crews switched between bolts for anti-personnel attacks and rounded stones to smash fortifications. Some versions were even adapted for naval use, turning ships into floating artillery platforms. This adaptability made it a staple of Roman warfare for centuries, a weapon so effective its basic principles influenced artillery designs well into the Middle Ages. What's remarkable is how the Scorpion blurred the line between machine and weapon. It wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was a product of Rome's obsession with mechanical superiority, a reflection of their belief that engineering could conquer even the fiercest foes. Today, we'd call it a force multiplier, but to the legionaries who relied on it, the Scorpion was something simpler, the difference between victory and annihilation. In an age before gunpowder, no weapon combined precision, power, and psychological impact quite like this, a reminder that sometimes the deadliest innovations aren't the loudest, but the ones that strike with silent, surgical lethality. The repeating crossbow, known as the Chu-Ko-Nu, was a game-changer on ancient battlefields, a weapon so ahead of its time it could unleash a barrage of bolts faster than an archer could knock a single arrow. Developed during China's Warring States period and perfected by the Han Dynasty, this ingenious device functioned like an ancient machine gun, capable of firing up to 10 bolts in just 15 seconds. Imagine facing a line of soldiers wielding these weapons. With each pull of the lever, another deadly projectile would launch, turning the battlefield into a storm of whirring death. Unlike traditional crossbows that required slow, meticulous reloading, the Chu-Ko-Nu's magazine-fed design allowed for continuous fire, giving its users an overwhelming tactical edge. At the heart of this weapon's brilliance was its simplicity. A rectangular box mounted atop the crossbow held the bolts, which gravity fed into position as the shooter worked a lever back and forth. Pulling the lever forward drew the string and loaded a bolt, while pulling it backward fired the shot, a seamless cycle that required minimal training to master. This meant even conscripted farmers could be quickly taught to operate it, transforming ordinary troops into rapid-firing killing machines. The bolts themselves were shorter than traditional arrows, often dipped in poison to maximize their lethality. Against unarmored foes or cavalry charges, the sheer volume of fire could decimate ranks before they closed the distance. The Chu-Ko-Nu truly proved its worth during the Han Dynasty's conflicts with the nomadic Xiongnu and later against Mongol invaders. These mounted warriors relied on speed and hit-and-run tactics, but the repeating crossbow turned their greatest strength into a vulnerability. Defenders perched on city walls or behind barricades could unleash hails of bolts, cutting down horsemen before they could retreat. Historical accounts describe entire Mongol assaults stalling under the relentless barrage, their advance halted by what must have seemed like an impossible rate of fire. Even Genghis Khan's forces, masters of psychological warfare, are said to have hesitated when facing armies equipped with these weapons, yet the Chu-Ko-Nu wasn't without flaws. Its short range, barely half that of a standard crossbow, meant users had to hold their ground under pressure. The lightweight bolts also struggled against heavy armor, making it less effective against well-shielded foes. But in the right conditions, particularly in ambushes or defensive positions, it was devastating. What's fascinating is how its legacy endured. Variations of the design appeared as late as the 19th century, used by Qing dynasty forces against Western powers during the Opium Wars, proof that even in the age of gunpowder, this ancient innovation still held a place on the battlefield. More than just a weapon, the Chu-Ko-Nu symbolized a revolution in military thinking. It showed that volume of fire could compensate for individual precision, a concept that echoes in modern automatic weapons. While it couldn't single-handedly decide wars, its psychological impact and tactical flexibility made it a cornerstone of Chinese warfare for over 1,000 years. In a world where most weapons favored strength or skill, the repeating crossbow was a triumph of ingenuity, a reminder that sometimes the deadliest advantage isn't power, but the ability to strike faster than your enemy can blink. The Khopesh wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. With its curved blade resembling a lion's claw, this sickle-shaped sword became the signature arm of Egypt's warrior pharaohs, a brutal fusion of axe and sword that reigned supreme on the battlefields of the Bronze Age. Unlike straight-edged blades, the Khopesh's unique design allowed warriors to hook shields, slash through flesh with terrifying efficiency, and even deliver crushing blows like a mace. But its power went beyond mere utility. It symbolized the might of the pharaohs themselves, often depicted in the hands of gods and kings as an instrument of divine justice. Emerging around 2500 BC, the Khopesh evolved from earlier crescent-shaped axes used by Near Eastern armies. Egyptian smiths refined the design, elongating the blade and adding a sharpened outer edge, turning it into a versatile hybrid weapon. The curve concentrated force at the point of impact, enabling devastating slashes that could cleave limbs or crush bones with a single stroke. Historical reliefs show soldiers wielding it with a reverse grip, using the hook to yank enemies off chariots or disarm opponents mid-combat. In close quarters fighting against the Hyksos or Nubians, the Khopesh's ability to bypass shields made it a nightmare for adversaries accustomed to traditional straight swords. No moment showcased its dominance more than the Battle of Kadesh, where Ramses II allegedly wielded one in his legendary charge against the Hittites. Accounts describe him cleaving through enemy lines like Re's fiery wrath, the Khopesh's curved blade glinting in the sun as it carved a path through armored charioteers. The weapon's psychological impact was just as potent as its physical damage. Seeing Pharaoh himself swinging this iconic blade would have struck terror into the hearts of his foes. Art from the period often exaggerates its size in royal depictions, emphasizing its role as an extension of pharaonic power. Beyond warfare, the Khopesh held deep ceremonial significance. Tutankhamun was buried with two ornate gold and ebony versions, their blades inscribed with prayers to guide him in the afterlife. Later pharaohs used stylized khopeshes in rituals, symbolizing their ability to cut down chaos and protect Maat, the cosmic order. Even foreign conquerors like the Assyrians adopted modified versions, a testament to its fearsome reputation across the ancient world. What makes the Khopesh remarkable is how perfectly it embodied Egyptian martial philosophy, elegant yet brutal, practical yet sacred. While later civilizations favored straight swords, this curved marvel remained in use for over 1,000 years, outlasting entire dynasties. Today, its silhouette remains instantly recognizable, a lasting icon of an empire that understood the power of a weapon to dominate both battlefields and imaginations. The sarissa wasn't just a spear, it was a revolution on the battlefield, a towering 18-foot lance that turned Macedonian infantry into an impenetrable forest of death. Under Philip II and his son Alexander, this weapon transformed warfare, creating a phalanx formation so dense and disciplined it could shatter enemy lines without ever letting them get close enough to strike back. Picture a wall of iron points bristling like the quills of a porcupine, each sarissa held by a soldier trained to move as one relentless machine. Against cavalry charges or disorganized infantry, the effect was catastrophic. Opponents found themselves skewered long before their own weapons could reach the Macedonians. What made the sarissa so devastating was its unprecedented length. While typical Greek hoplites fought with 8-foot spears, Macedonian pikemen could strike from nearly 3 times that distance, creating a killing zone where enemies couldn't even swing a sword. The rear rows of the phalanx angled their sarissas upward to deflect arrows and javelins, while the front rows presented an unbreakable barrier of sharpened steel. This wasn't just a defensive tactic. When the phalanx advanced, those overlapping spear points created a rolling wave of destruction, pushing forward with the weight of hundreds of armored men driving them onward. At the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander's sarissa wielding phalanxes held firm against Darius III's elite cavalry, their disciplined formations turning what should have been a crushing charge into a bloody stalemate. The weapon's design was as ingenious as its use, made from tough cornel wood with an iron tip and a bronze butt spike for balance. The sarissa required immense strength and coordination to wield effectively. Soldiers carried it with both hands, their small shields strapped to their left arms to avoid hindering movement. This two-handed grip allowed for precise thrusting motions, turning each phalanx into a living, breathing engine of destruction. The length also meant that even if an enemy survived the first row of points, 4 or 5 more lethal tips waited behind it, a layered defense no conventional army could penetrate. But the true genius of the sarissa lay in how it synergized with Alexander's combined arms tactics. While the phalanx pinned enemy forces in place, his elite companion cavalry would deliver the decisive blow to their flanks or rear. Against the Persians at Issus, this combination proved unbeatable. The sarissa armed infantry held the line against superior numbers, while Alexander himself led the cavalry charge that shattered Darius's army. The weapon's psychological impact was just as potent as its physical reach. Ancient accounts describe Persian soldiers recoiling in horror at the sight of the advancing Macedonian hedgehog, their shorter swords and spears useless against this terrifying innovation. Yet the sarissa wasn't invincible. On rough or uneven terrain, the tight phalanx formations could falter, as seen during Alexander's costly battles in the Hindu Kush. Later generals like the Romans would exploit this weakness by forcing phalanxes onto broken ground where their rigid structure collapsed. But in its heyday, no weapon better symbolized Macedonian military dominance. From the plains of Gaugamela to the banks of the Hydaspes, the sarissa didn't just win battles. It built an empire stretching from Greece to India, proving that sometimes the simplest innovations, a longer spear, a tighter formation, unbreakable discipline, could conquer the known world. The Ulfberht swords weren't just weapons, they were marvels of medieval metallurgy, blades so advanced they seemed like gifts from the gods. Forged between the 8th and 11th centuries, these Frankish masterpieces wielded by Viking elites stood head and shoulders above anything else in Europe, their steel so pure and flexible it bordered on supernatural. What made them extraordinary wasn't just their legendary sharpness, but their very composition, a high-carbon steel comparable to modern alloys, centuries ahead of contemporary European forging techniques. Forensic studies reveal the shocking truth. Ulfberht blades contained steel with a carbon content of nearly 1.2%, making them stronger yet more flexible than the brittle iron weapons of the time. While most Dark Age swords shattered under heavy blows or corroded rapidly, Ulfberhts could bend nearly 45 degrees without breaking and hold an edge that made them lethal through countless battles. The secret likely lay in their raw material crucible steel from Central Asia, possibly traded along the Volga route from Persia or India. This Damascus steel equivalent contained vanadium and other trace elements that gave it near-mythical properties, something European blacksmiths wouldn't replicate until the Industrial Revolution. What's fascinating is how these swords were marked. Each blade bore the inscription plus Ulfberht plus T, inlaid with iron letters, a signature that became both a brand and a seal of quality. The name itself remains a mystery, possibly a master smith, a workshop, or even a religious reference to the wolf Ulf and bear Bert as symbols of strength. Over 170 specimens have been found across Europe, all varying slightly in design but sharing that uncanny metallurgical superiority. Viking sagas speak of warriors paying fortunes for these blades, sometimes equal to the price of a small farm, knowing they were buying not just a weapon but an heirloom that could last generations. The Ulfberht's battlefield performance became the stuff of legend. In an era where most combatants used pattern-welded swords, layered strips of iron hammered together, these monosteel blades could shear through lesser weapons with terrifying efficiency. Norse poetry describes them singing through the air and cleaving helmets like ripe fruit. At the Battle of Maldon in 991, Anglo-Saxon chroniclers noted how Viking champions wielding these swords cut through mail armor as if it were cloth, their strikes unhindered by the defensive gear that typically neutralized lesser blades. Yet the true enigma is how this technology appeared and then vanished. By the 12th century, Ulfberht production ceased, possibly because trade routes bringing crucible steel collapsed or because the secret of working such pure metal was lost. Later medieval swords, while formidable, wouldn't match their quality until the Renaissance. Today, the few surviving Ulfberhts still mesmerize metallurgists, living proof that the Dark Ages held flashes of brilliance we're only now beginning to understand. These weren't just tools of war, they were artifacts of a lost technological pinnacle, whispering of connections between continents and craftsmen whose skills defied their time. Flaming arrows had been used for centuries, but the ancient Chinese and Greeks took this terrifying concept to horrifying new heights with mechanized launchers that turned night skies into rivers of fire. Picture siege engines capable of launching not just single flaming arrows, but volleys of incendiary projectiles that rained down on enemy fortifications like meteors. The Chinese flying fire of the Tang dynasty stood as one of history's earliest examples of gunpowder-enhanced warfare, tubes packed with slow-burning powder that propelled arrows tipped with flammable compounds. These weren't mere signal flares, they were precision instruments of chaos designed to ignite wooden structures, siege towers, and supply depots with terrifying accuracy. What made these systems revolutionary was their combination of chemistry and engineering. Greek versions used torsion-powered ballistae to hurl clay pots filled with a volatile mixture of pitch, sulfur, and quicklime, a formula that burst into violent flames on impact. But the Chinese approach was even more sophisticated. By the 9th century, their alchemists had perfected early gunpowder compositions, mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur into a paste that could be packed into bamboo tubes. When ignited, these primitive rockets shot forward with enough force to pierce enemy shields before the attached firebombs detonated. Historical records from the siege of Shaozhou describe Tang defenders launching hundreds of these flying fire arrows in coordinated barrages, turning the city walls into an impassable inferno that forced rebel forces to retreat in disarray. The psychological effect was as devastating as the physical damage. Unlike ordinary fire arrows that could be smothered with wet blankets or sand, these enhanced versions burned hotter and longer, their sticky compounds clinging to whatever they touched. Greek accounts of the siege of Tyre mention defenders panicking as entire sections of their wooden battlements erupted in unquenchable flames, the relentless barrage making it impossible to organize countermeasures. In China, the mere rumor that a besieging army possessed flying fire was sometimes enough to trigger surrenders. Commanders knew their grain stores and powder magazines couldn't survive the onslaught. But the true innovation lay in the tactical flexibility of these systems. The Chinese developed multi-arrow launchers capable of firing dozens of incendiary projectiles simultaneously, essentially creating medieval cluster munitions. During the Song dynasty's defense against Jurchen invaders, engineers mounted these launchers on wheeled carts, allowing rapid repositioning to target vulnerable points in the enemy's siege lines. Some variants even incorporated timed fuses, ensuring the arrows burst into flame mid-flight for maximum visual terror before impact. This wasn't just fire, it was psychological warfare engineered to break morale as much as destroy material. What's fascinating is how these ancient technologies foreshadowed modern artillery tactics. The principles behind these fire arrow launchers, volume of fire, psychological disruption, and precision deployment remain central to military doctrine today. Yet for all their sophistication, their recipes were often lost to time, their exact compositions debated by historians. Like Greek fire, they stand as reminders that the ancient world's mastery of chemistry and engineering was far more advanced than we often assume, and that sometimes the most devastating weapons aren't those that kill outright, but those that turn the battlefield into a waking nightmare. The hoplon wasn't just a shield, it was the beating heart of Spartan warfare, a 3-foot-wide bronze-clad disc that turned individual warriors into an unbreakable wall of death. Weighing nearly 30 pounds with its wooden core and bronze facing, this wasn't merely defensive gear, it was the cornerstone of the phalanx formation, where each soldier's shield overlapped his neighbor's to create an impenetrable barrier. But what made it truly revolutionary was how it transformed defense into offense. When Spartan ranks advanced, they didn't just hold their ground. They became a single crushing force, driving forward with their shields in the brutal tactic known as the othismos, or the push. Imagine hundreds of armored men slamming their hoplons into enemy lines like a human battering ram, the sheer weight and coordination collapsing opposition like reeds in a storm. More than its physical properties, the hoplon embodied the Spartan ideal of communal warfare. Unlike other cultures where warriors might boast individual glory, a Spartan's shield existed primarily to protect the man to his left. The famous saying, "Come back with this shield or on it," wasn't just about personal honor. It emphasized that losing your hoplon meant breaking the phalanx's cohesion, endangering your entire unit. This interdependence forged unparalleled discipline. Every soldier knew his survival depended on his brothers in arms maintaining the shield wall. At battles like Thermopylae, this mentality allowed 300 Spartans to hold off thousands, their overlapping hoplons creating a killing zone where Persian forces funneled into bronze-clad death. The shield's design revealed its dual purpose. Its concave shape could trap enemy spears, while the bronze rim served as a blunt weapon during close combat. Spartans were trained to deliver devastating shield bashes to stun opponents before driving their short swords into exposed flesh. Some accounts describe hoplites using the shield's edge to hook an enemy's leg or weapon, toppling them for the killing thrust. This versatility made it far more than passive protection. It was an active instrument of controlled violence. culturally, the hoplon transcended the battlefield. Young Spartan males underwent grueling training where they first received their shields at age 7. The wood deliberately left rough so their hands would toughen from constant grip. During coming-of-age rituals, mothers would hand their sons a hoplon with the warning to return victorious or dead. Even in peacetime, the shield's image appeared on coins and civic monuments, symbolizing the collective spirit that placed the city-state above individual life. Unlike the ornate decorations of Athenian shields, Spartan hoplons bore simple designs, often just the lambda symbol for lace demonry, enforcing their austere philosophy. What's often overlooked is how the hoplon influenced warfare beyond Greece. When Alexander's armies encountered Indian war elephants, they adapted phalanx tactics using reinforced shields to create mobile fortresses. Centuries later, Roman legionaries would adopt a modified version of the Othismos push with their scutum shields. Yet none replicated the cultural weight of the hoplon, a weapon that wasn't just carried but lived with, slept beside, and died defending. In an era of glittering swords and spears, Sparta's greatest weapon was a humble disc of wood and bronze that taught men how to conquer as one. The atlatl wasn't just a tool. It was humanity's first great leap in weapons technology, a deceptively simple device that transformed spears into long-range missiles capable of bringing down mammoths and warriors alike. This prehistoric innovation, essentially a lever for the arm, could hurl a dart with such force and accuracy it remained in military use for over 30,000 years, from Paleolithic hunters to Aztec warriors facing Spanish conquistadors. The genius lay in its physics. By extending the thrower's arm with a rigid wooden or bone shaft, the atlatl acted as an extra joint, increasing the spear's acceleration and range by up to 300%. A well-trained user could launch a projectile over 150 feet at speeds exceeding 90 miles per hour, comparable to some modern compound bows. What made the atlatl revolutionary was its universal adaptability. Archaeologists have found variations across every inhabited continent. Inuit hunters used ivory versions to harpoon seals, while Australian Aboriginals crafted sleek hardwood models for kangaroo hunting. The Aztecs called it the Tlacochtli and equipped entire regiments with obsidian-tipped darts designed to puncture Spanish armor. At the Battle of Sempoala in 1520, indigenous warriors demonstrated its lethal potential by skewering armored conquistadors from distances where muskets were ineffective. Spanish chroniclers wrote in shock of darts piercing steel breastplates, as if they were parchment, proving that Stone Age technology could still dominate early gunpowder weapons in the right hands. The mechanics behind this ancient marvel reveal surprising sophistication. When the thrower whips the atlatl forward, the flexible dart stores energy like a coiled spring, releasing at the perfect moment to achieve what physicists call kinetic chain transfer. The groove or spur at the end of the atlatl keeps the dart aligned during this whipping motion, preventing wobble that would ruin accuracy. Some advanced designs featured finger loops or weight stones to fine-tune balance, showing an intuitive understanding of rotational dynamics millennia before Newton's laws. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that an atlatl dart can deliver more kinetic energy to a target than an arrow from a 60-pound longbow, explaining how Paleolithic hunters could take down megafauna like woolly rhinos with apparent ease. Perhaps most fascinating is how this prehistoric invention paved the way for later artillery. The same basic principle, using a lever to amplify throwing force, evolved into medieval traction trebuchets, where teams of men pulled ropes to swing a long arm. Even modern catapults and ballistic systems owe conceptual debts to the humble atlatl's demonstration of mechanical advantage, yet its legacy extends beyond warfare. The atlatl represented humanity's first step toward mastering physics, transforming raw muscle power into controlled projectile technology. When an Aztec warrior launched a Tlacochtli dart or a Cro-Magnon hunter speared a bison, They weren't just feeding their tribe or defending their land, they were proving that even the simplest tools wielded with ingenuity could change the course of history. The Shotel wasn't just a weapon, it was a curve of calculated brutality, a sickle-shaped sword so audacious in its design that it turned defensive warfare on its head. Forged by the smiths of ancient Ethiopia, this 2-foot-long nightmare weapon featured a double-edged blade that curled back in a near semicircle, creating a hook capable of reaching around shields to gut opponents with chilling efficiency. Aksumite warriors wielded it with terrifying skill, slashing downward in arcs that bypassed armor and shields alike, striking at necks, shoulders, and thighs with surgical precision. When Arab invaders first encountered these curved blades during 7th century clashes with the Kingdom of Aksum, they dubbed them the snake's tongue, a testament to how swiftly and unexpectedly they could strike. What set the Shotel apart from other African sickle swords was its unique curvature and combat philosophy. Unlike the Egyptian Khopesh, which used its curve primarily for powerful chopping blows, the Ethiopian design emphasized deceptive thrusting and hooking motions. Warriors trained to rotate their wrists mid-swing, making the blade snake around defensive positions with eerie fluidity. Portuguese mercenaries fighting in 16th century Abyssinian conflicts left vivid accounts of the terror these weapons inspired. One soldier described watching an Aksumite champion disarm 3 opponents in rapid succession, using the Shotel's hook to yank away shields before delivering fatal stabs to exposed torsos. The weapon became synonymous with the elite royal guard of Ethiopian emperors, its distinctive shape appearing on church murals and royal regalia as a symbol of divine authority. The Shotel's effectiveness lay in its synergy with indigenous combat styles. Ethiopian warriors fought in loose formations that emphasized individual skill over rigid phalanxes, allowing the sword's unique movements to shine. Against Arab cavalry, they'd use the curved blade to unseat riders by hooking legs or arms, then finish them with downward stabs through gaps in chainmail. When facing Portuguese arquebusiers, the Shotel's close-quarters lethality turned battles into brutal melees where firearms became useless. At the Battle of Wainadoga in 1543, Emperor Geladuos reportedly led a charge of Shotel-armed warriors that broke the back of Adal Ottoman forces, demonstrating how this ancient weapon could still dominate gunpowder-era battlefields. Comparisons with other African sickle swords reveal fascinating regional adaptations. The Congolese Ikakaloka shared the Shotel's curve but was shorter and thicker, optimized for jungle warfare where quick slashes mattered more than reach. Meanwhile, the Sengelese Nimcha featured a less pronounced curve designed for slashing from horseback. Yet none matched the Shotel's specialized shield-defeating capabilities, a testament to how Ethiopian metallurgists tailored their weapons to counter specific threats from neighboring empires. Modern martial artists attempting to reconstruct Shotel techniques discover its surprising versatility. The same curve that could hook a shield also allowed disarming maneuvers and even grappling techniques when used with reversed grips. More than just a tool of war, the Shotel embodied Ethiopia's enduring independence. While other African kingdoms fell to colonial powers, Ethiopian rulers maintained sovereignty, and their warriors' mastery of this unconventional sword played no small part in that legacy. Today, surviving examples in museums still bear the intricate gold inlay and biblical inscriptions favored by Aksumite nobility, silent witnesses to a weapon that refused to conform to anyone's rules but its own. In a world of straight blades and predictable warfare, the Shotel's defiant curve carved a path through history as unforgettable as its victims' final moments. The ballista redefined ancient siege warfare, a colossal crossbow engineered to perfection by Roman hands, capable of launching massive stones or iron-tipped bolts with terrifying precision up to 500 yards away. Unlike its Greek predecessors, which relied on tension from sinew bundles, the Roman version utilized torsion springs made from twisted horsehair or sinew, storing unbelievable energy that could be unleashed in a single devastating shot. Picture a machine so powerful it could punch through fortress walls, impale multiple soldiers in a single strike, or rain down destruction from distances where defenders couldn't even see the attackers. This wasn't just artillery, it was psychological warfare cast in wood and iron. What set the ballista apart was its meticulous engineering. Roman craftsmen refined the Greek designs, introducing adjustable windlasses to control tension and precision, gears to fine-tune trajectory. The arms of the machine swung inward when fired, eliminating the wasted lateral movement of earlier models and concentrating all force into the projectile. Some versions could hurl stones weighing up to 80 pounds, enough to collapse wooden palisades in a single hit, while others fired specialized bolts with iron heads shaped like spear points, designed to penetrate shields and armor with ease. During the siege of Carthage in 146 BC, Roman forces deployed entire batteries of ballistae, their synchronized volleys reducing sections of the city's famed walls to rubble and clearing the way for the final assault that would erase Carthage from the map. The weapon's versatility made it indispensable. In open battles, ballistae served as anti-personnel artillery, their bolts capable of skewering advancing infantry lines like meat on a spit. At the Battle of Alesia, Caesar positioned them atop his fortifications to break Gallic charges before they reached Roman lines, but it was in sieges where the ballista truly shone. Engineers calculated firing angles to exploit weak points in enemy defenses, sometimes even using flaming projectiles to ignite rooftops and storage depots. The sound alone was a weapon. Historical accounts describe the terrifying screech of torsion ropes releasing, followed by the whistle of incoming death, a combination that shattered morale as effectively as the physical destruction. Yet the ballista's greatest innovation was its modularity. Romans built them in various sizes, from massive wheeled versions requiring oxen to move, down to man-portable Scorpion models that could be disassembled and carried by mules. This adaptability allowed armies to deploy artillery wherever it was needed, whether in mountain passes or open plains. Later iterations even incorporated swivel mechanisms, enabling crews to adjust aim without repositioning the entire machine, a feature that wouldn't reappear in artillery until the Renaissance. What's often overlooked is how these machines blurred the line between tool and terror. During the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE, Jewish chronicles describe Roman ballistae launching not just stones, but containers filled with molten lead or quicklime that burst open on impact, scattering lethal hot metal or blinding dust. The psychological toll was as calculated as the physical damage. Defenders knew there was no hiding from a weapon that could strike with pinpoint accuracy from beyond the horizon of their vision. The ballista's legacy didn't end with Rome. Medieval engineers revived its principles in trebuchets and catapults, though none matched its precision until the age of gunpowder. Even today, its basic torsion spring concept survives in modern artillery recoil systems. But perhaps its most enduring lesson was this: warfare wasn't just about strength or numbers, it was about physics, engineering, and the ruthless application of science to the art of destruction. In the hands of Rome, the ballista wasn't merely a weapon. It was the future of conquest, forged in iron and launched with mathematical certainty. The naginata wasn't just a weapon, it was an equalizer on the battlefield, a 7-foot-long fusion of sword and spear that turned foot soldiers into cavalry-killing machines. With its elegantly curved blade mounted on a sturdy wooden shaft, this Japanese polearm combined the slicing power of a katana with the reach of a spear, creating a versatile tool that dominated combat for centuries. Originally developed during the Heian period, the naginata became legendary for its ability to counter mounted samurai, its sweeping arcs capable of severing horse legs or unseating riders with a single well-placed stroke. But its brilliance lay in its adaptability. Warriors could pivot seamlessly between wide slashes to control space and precise thrusts to exploit gaps in armor, making it devastating in both open battle and cramped castle corridors. For the warrior monks of Mount Hiei, the naginata became a symbol of spiritual and martial prowess. These Sohei trained relentlessly with the weapon, developing techniques that turned its length into an advantage against shorter swords. Historical scrolls depict them spinning naginatas like extensions of their bodies, creating swirling barriers of steel that could decimate charging enemies. During the Genpei War, these warrior monks used their polearm mastery to hold bridges and mountain passes against samurai forces, their superior reach negating the cavalry charges that normally decided medieval Japanese battles. The naginata's curved blade proved especially lethal against the lacquered armor of the time. Its slicing motion could shear through bamboo and leather laminations that might deflect straight sword cuts. Samurai women soon adopted the naginata as their signature weapon, turning societal expectations on their head. While forbidden from wielding katana like their male counterparts, noble women like Tomo Gozen became infamous for their naginata skills during the 12th century. The weapon's length compensated for typically smaller stature, allowing them to engage opponents from a safer distance. Battle accounts describe female defenders using naginatas to hook enemies off balconies or stab through arrow slits during castle sieges. By the Edo period, the naginata had become so associated with women's self-defense that it was included in bridal trousseaux, a beautiful but deadly heirloom passed down through generations. What truly set the naginata apart was its technical diversity. Schools of martial arts developed specialized forms, some emphasizing wide, circular swings to control multiple opponents, others focusing on surgical stabs to vulnerable spots like the armpits or throat. The blade's curve allowed for pulling cuts that increased laceration depth, while the heavy pommel could crush helmets as a blunt weapon. Unlike European halberds which relied on brute force, the naginata's design prioritized fluid motion, enabling practitioners to transition between 8 fundamental strikes and 12 defensive positions with seamless grace. Modern tests demonstrate the weapon's frightening efficiency. Against replica samurai armor, a properly swung naginata can deliver enough force to cleave through 3 inches of bamboo and layered silk padding, the equivalent of severing a limb through medieval protection. Its legacy endures in Japanese martial arts today, where naginata jutsu remains one of the few traditional disciplines still predominantly practiced by women. This elegant polearm proved that on the battlefield, adaptability trumped raw strength, a lesson written in the curved steel of a weapon that refused to be outmatched. The Falx wasn't just a sword, it was a nightmare made of iron, a brutally curved 2-handed blade that forced the mighty Roman Empire to redesign its armor. Wielded by the fierce Dacian warriors, this scythe-like weapon measured nearly 3 feet of tempered steel with a forward curving tip designed for one purpose: to split shields, helmets, and skulls with a single devastating chop. When Trajan's legions first encountered it during the Dacian Wars at the turn of the 2nd century, hardened centurions recoiled in shock as the Falx cleaved through their famed scutum shields like wet parchment, its unique shape concentrating force into a single lethal point that Roman armor couldn't withstand. Archaeological evidence reveals the terror this weapon inspired. Excavations at Roman battle sites in modern-day Romania show helmets with reinforced crossbars hastily added after initial clashes, a direct response to Falx strikes that could shear through the older designs with terrifying ease. Contemporary accounts describe Dacian warriors swinging the Falx in overhead arcs, using its weight and curve to generate enough force to sever limbs even through chainmail. The Roman historian Cassius Dio recorded legionaries adopting makeshift armor modifications, including layered leather sleeves and greaves, specifically to counter Falx attacks. Few weapons in history forced Rome's legendary military machine to adapt so dramatically. Modern tests with replicated Falx blades demonstrate why it was so feared. When swung with proper technique, a downward diagonal chop starting from behind the shoulder, the blade can generate nearly 600 pounds of impact force, enough to split replica Roman helmets cleanly in two. Unlike straight gladius thrusts that relied on precision, the Falx was brutally egalitarian. Even moderately trained fighters could deliver crippling blows through sheer momentum. Its curve also created a hooking effect, allowing Dacian warriors to yank shields aside before delivering fatal follow-up strikes. Against the disciplined Roman testudo formation, this proved devastating. The Falx's unique angle could reach over the top of interlocked shields, striking at the heads and shoulders of soldiers who thought themselves protected. The Falx's dominance wasn't just physical, it rewrote Roman military psychology. Trajan's column in Rome depicts the Dacian Wars with unusual attention to this weapon, showing fallen legionaries with gruesome Falx wounds. Some scholars believe these carvings served both as propaganda and a sobering lesson about the price of conquest. After two grueling campaigns, Rome's eventual victory came not from defeating the Falx directly, but by adapting tactics to avoid close combat where it excelled. They employed more archers to thin Dacian ranks before engagement and developed specialized gladiator training to simulate Falx techniques, an ancient form of battlefield preparation that foreshadowed modern military exercises. Today, the Falx stands as a testament to how a single weapon can redefine warfare. While Rome absorbed Dacia into its empire, the Falx left an indelible mark on military history, proving that sometimes the most effective innovations aren't technological marvels, but brutally simple tools wielded with uncompromising ferocity. In the hands of warriors defending their homeland, this curved blade became more than steel. It was the spirit of resistance made manifest, bending even the might of Rome to its will. The trebuchet redefined siege warfare, an engineering marvel that flung destruction with terrifying precision, using nothing but gravity and ingenious mechanics to hurl projectiles heavier than 2 horses over castle walls. Unlike earlier catapults relying on twisted ropes or human strength, this medieval monster employed a massive counterweight, swinging like a pendulum to launch stones with deadly accuracy up to 300 yards away. The Chinese first pioneered traction trebuchets in the 4th century BCE, where teams of men pulled ropes to create throwing force, but by the 12th century, European engineers had perfected the devastating counterweight version. Picture a wooden giant towering over battlefields, its throwing arm longer than 3 men standing end to end, capable of reducing fortified towers to rubble with a single well-placed shot. What made the trebuchet so revolutionary was its simple yet flawless physics. When the counterweight, often a wooden box filled with tons of earth or stone, dropped, it propelled the shorter end of the beam downward while the longer sling end whipped upward with incredible speed. At just the right moment, a release mechanism would let go, sending the projectile arcing toward its target with mathematical precision. Engineers could adjust range by altering the counterweight's mass or the sling's length, allowing crews to fine-tune shots mid-siege. Some versions could launch stones weighing over 300 pounds. Records describe King Edward I's Warwolf at Stirling Castle hurling boulders so massive they shattered entire curtain walls in a single impact, forcing surrenders before armies even breached the gates. But the trebuchet's true brilliance lay in its versatility. Beyond stone, armies loaded them with incendiary projectiles, barrels of quicklime, or even diseased carcasses for biological warfare, medieval terror tactics designed to break both structures and morale. During the Mongol sieges of the 13th century, Genghis Khan's engineers adapted Persian designs to create mobile trebuchets that could be disassembled and carried on horseback, reassembled at each new conquest. At the siege of Xianyang in 1273, these weapons bombarded Chinese defenders relentlessly for 5 years, their relentless barrage demonstrating how psychological torment could be as decisive as physical destruction. Modern reconstructions reveal astonishing details. A full-scale trebuchet built in France demonstrated that it could hit a target the size of a castle window from 200 yards away, a level of accuracy rivaling early cannon. Teams of engineers have calculated that the largest historical models could generate over 50,000 foot-pounds of energy per shot, equivalent to a small car crashing into a wall at 30 miles per hour. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect was its democratic nature. Unlike costly cannons requiring bronze and gunpowder, a trebuchet could be built from local timber and rubble, making siege warfare accessible to even modest armies. The trebuchet's reign lasted until gunpowder rendered it obsolete, but its legacy endures in physics classrooms and medieval festivals worldwide. More than just a weapon, it was a testament to human ingenuity, proof that with the right application of leverage and gravity, even the mightiest walls could be brought low. In an age of swords and arrows, the trebuchet stood as a towering reminder. Sometimes the simplest principles harnessed at scale could shake empires. The macuahuitl was no ordinary sword. It was a wooden blade lined with volcanic glass so sharp it could reportedly decapitate a horse in a single swing. When Spanish conquistadors first faced Aztec warriors wielding these terrifying weapons, their steel armor offered little protection against razor-edged obsidian fragments capable of slicing through flesh with surgical precision. Fashioned from sturdy hardwood and embedded with rows of prism-shaped obsidian blades, the macuahuitl combined the blunt force of a club with the cutting power of 100 miniature scalpels, creating wounds that left European survivors describing victims cut open like slaughtered deer. What made this weapon truly exceptional was the material science behind its cutting edges. Obsidian, a volcanic glass formed when lava cools rapidly, naturally fractures into edges just 3 nanometers thick at the molecular level, sharper than modern surgical steel. Aztec craftsmen carefully knapped these glass shards into trapezoidal blades, each honed to a monomolecular edge that could sever muscle fibers with minimal resistance. Modern tests show obsidian blades produce cleaner incisions than metal scalpels in certain medical procedures, explaining why a well-swung macuahuitl could reportedly cleave limbs with terrifying efficiency. The weapon's design amplified this natural lethality. The wooden paddle distributed impact force evenly along multiple cutting edges, ensuring every strike delivered maximum laceration depth. Spanish accounts from Hernán Cortés' campaigns reveal how the macuahuitl shattered European assumptions about primitive weaponry. At the Battle of Otumba in 1520, conquistador Bernal Díaz del Castillo described seeing comrades lose arms and heads to these obsidian-studded clubs, their steel helmets split like melons under the impact. One particularly gruesome account tells of an Aztec warrior decapitating a Spanish horse with a single overhead strike, an act of psychological warfare as much as physical brutality that sent riders tumbling into deadly melees. The Florentine Codex, a 16th-century ethnographic study of Aztec culture, depicts warriors training with macuahuitls in ceremonial combat, demonstrating elaborate sweeping motions designed to maximize the weapon's unique cutting angles. Beyond the battlefield, the macuahuitl held deep spiritual significance. Aztec glyphs show gods wielding symbolic versions during sacrificial ceremonies, their obsidian edges representing the razor between life and death. Some surviving examples feature turquoise and jade inlays, precious materials reserved for elite warriors and ritual objects. During the Toxcatl festival, priests reportedly used ceremonial macuahuitls to perform mock battles, re-enacting cosmic struggles between light and darkness, blurring the line between weapon and sacred artifact. The weapon's effectiveness came with trade-offs. Unlike metal swords, obsidian blades chipped and dulled after sustained use, requiring constant replacement, a vulnerability Spanish forces exploited by prolonging engagements. Yet in the hands of experienced warriors, this became a tactical advantage. Shattered obsidian shards created secondary projectiles that could blind or maim even when blocking attacks. Recent archaeological finds at Templo Mayor revealed workshops containing thousands of unused obsidian blades, suggesting Aztec armies maintained sophisticated logistical networks to keep their warriors supplied with fresh cutting edges. Modern metallurgists remain fascinated by the Macuahuitl's engineering. While European swords relied on weight and rigidity for power, this Mesoamerican innovation achieved similar lethality through distributed cutting surfaces and material science ahead of its time. The weapon's legacy persists in surprising places. Some modern trauma surgeons study obsidian's cutting properties for specialized procedures, proving that the Aztecs understood blade technology in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. More than just a tool of conquest, the Macuahuitl stands as a testament to indigenous innovation, a reminder that advanced engineering can emerge from any civilization when necessity meets creativity. The corvus wasn't just a naval weapon, it was Rome's audacious solution to a deadly problem, a swinging bridge with an iron spike that turned sea battles into brutal land combat. Picture this: Carthaginian sailors, masters of the Mediterranean, confident in their ability to outmaneuver Roman ships, suddenly facing a 12-foot wooden gangplank slamming down onto their decks, its massive spike embedding deep into their hulls. Before they could react, legionaries in full armor would charge across, transforming a naval skirmish into the close-quarters fighting Rome excelled at. This ingenious device, named for its resemblance to a raven's beak, single-handedly neutralized Carthage's superior seamanship during the First Punic War, giving the land-bound Romans an unexpected edge at sea. What made the corvus so effective was its ruthless simplicity. Mounted on a rotating pole at the bow of Roman ships, the bridge could swing down in any direction once the enemy was within range. The spike at its end ensured it couldn't be easily dislodged, while the gangplank's width allowed two armored soldiers to advance side by side. Historical accounts describe Carthaginian crews freezing in horror as these bridges descended. Their agility and ramming tactics rendered useless when every ship they approached became a platform for legionaries to board and slaughter. At the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC, the corvus gave Rome its first major naval victory, capturing 31 Carthaginian vessels in a single day despite their inexperience at sea. Yet the corvus came with a fatal flaw. Its weight made ships dangerously unstable in rough seas. During storms or even moderate swells, the additional top-heavy load turned Roman quinquiremes into floating death traps. After multiple disasters where entire fleets capsized, including a catastrophic loss of 180 ships in a storm off Camarina, the Navy abandoned the device. Modern reconstructions reveal why. A fully loaded corvus could weigh over 1 ton, shifting the ship's center of gravity upward and making it prone to rolling. Rome's admiralty eventually prioritized more balanced ship designs, relying instead on improved marine tactics and trained rowers to match Carthage's prowess. The corvus's legacy lies in its sheer audacity, a weapon that defied conventional naval wisdom by forcing land warfare onto the waves. For a brief, glorious period, it allowed Rome to rewrite the rules of engagement, proving that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the most elegant but the one that plays to your strengths. Though short-lived, this spiked bridge marked a turning point in maritime warfare, demonstrating that dominance at sea could be won not just by sailors, but by soldiers who refused to fight on anyone's terms but their own. The chakram wasn't merely a throwing weapon. It was a lethal circle of steel that defied physics, an aerodynamically perfect ring capable of slicing through enemies at 30 yards before returning to its master's hand. Forged by Sikh warriors of 18th century Punjab, this razor-edged disc embodied both martial brilliance and spiritual symbolism, its circular form representing the eternal nature of God in Khalsa tradition. Unlike any other projectile, the chakram's thin metal rim, usually 2 to 12 inches in diameter, created minimal air resistance, allowing skilled users to achieve terrifying accuracy and velocities exceeding 60 miles per hour. Elite Akali warriors would carry multiple chakrams on their conical turbans, the stacked rings resembling deadly halos ready to be unleashed in blurred arcs of death. What set the chakram apart was its unpredictable flight path. When thrown with a sidearm spinning motion, the disc could curve around obstacles or skip off surfaces like a deadly stone across water. Historical accounts describe Sikh warriors decapitating enemies, hiding behind shields or cutting ropes holding up enemy tents from impossible angles. Modern physics explains why the gyroscopic stability from its spin kept the blade-oriented edge forward throughout flight, while slight finger pressure during release could alter its trajectory mid-air. Some Akali masters developed techniques to throw two chakrams simultaneously in intersecting paths, creating an inescapable web of whirling steel. Comparisons to other throwing rings reveal the chakram's unique lethality. Australian Aboriginal hunting boomerangs relied on airfoil shapes to return, sacrificing killing power for retrieval. Chinese wind and fire wheels were larger but required two-handed use primarily as melee weapons. Only the chakram combined throwability, deadliness, and spiritual significance so perfectly. Guru Gobind Singh himself incorporated it into Khalsa warrior initiation rituals, blessing chakrams alongside the Kirpan dagger as symbols of divine justice. Battle hymns celebrated how these wheels of death could strike oppressors like the sudden hand of karma. Modern tests demonstrate why the chakram inspired such awe. A properly thrown 12-inch diameter steel version can penetrate 3 inches into wood at 20 yards, enough to sever limbs or slice through bamboo armor common in Mughal-era India. Its flat profile allowed warriors to conceal stacks beneath clothing, deploying them faster than archers could nock arrows. When the British encountered Sikh forces during the Anglo-Sikh Wars, their reports noted with alarm how chakram-wielding warriors could decimate infantry lines before close combat even began. Yet the chakram's true genius lay in its duality, as both weapon and spiritual metaphor. The uncut hair of Khalsa warriors would sometimes be wound through the disc center during ceremonies, binding steel to soul. Its circular shape mirrored the Sikh concept of God as beginningless and endless, while its sharp edge represented the cutting away of ego. Even in peace, chakrams adorned Sikh temples as symbols of the warrior saint ideal, proving that sometimes the deadliest weapons carry the deepest meaning. In a world of swords and spears, this spinning steel circle stood apart, a reminder that perfection often comes not in points or edges, but in complete, unbroken rings of purpose. The gastrophetes wasn't just a weapon, it was the ancient world's first mechanical assassin, a silent killer that revolutionized warfare by combining the power of a bow with the precision of engineering. Developed by Greek inventors around the 4th century BC, this belly bow earned its name from its unique loading mechanism. Archers would brace the curved metal stirrup against their stomachs, using their body weight to draw the heavy sinew string back into place. Unlike traditional bows that required immense upper body strength, the gastrophetes allowed even moderately trained soldiers to deliver bolts with enough force to pierce armor at over 100 yards, a game changer in an era when most missile weapons relied on brute force over ingenuity. What set this device apart was its stealthy lethality. The gastrophetes lacked the telltale twang of a drawn bowstring, making it ideal for assassinations and nighttime raids. Historical fragments suggest Sicilian tyrants employed belly bowmen to eliminate rival leaders during public games. The weapon's compact size easily concealed beneath cloaks until the lethal moment. Its accuracy was equally terrifying. Heron of Alexandria later described an upgraded version featuring a sliding wooden stock and iron sights that could strike the eye of a statue at 60 paces. This precision engineering transformed it from a niche tool into a prototype for all future artillery, bridging the gap between handheld weapons and siege machines. Heron's improvements revealed the gastrophete's true potential. By adding a winch and pulley system, he created versions capable of launching heavier projectiles, effectively birthing the first torsion-powered ballistae. These scaled-up belly bows became the backbone of Hellenistic armies, their designs evolving into the monstrous siege engines that would later dominate Roman battlefields. Yet the original handheld version never lost its tactical niche. Alexander the Great reportedly deployed Gastrophetes teams during his siege of Tyre, their silent bolts picking off defenders on the walls while his main forces prepared their assault. Modern reconstructions demonstrate why this weapon so unnerved contemporaries. Firing a replica requires just 20 pounds of belly pressure to draw the string fully, yet the 8-inch hardwood bolts achieve velocities rivaling early medieval crossbows. The absence of recoil allows for remarkably steady aim, while the enclosed mechanism protects the sinew from moisture, a critical advantage in naval combat or rainy climates. Archaeologists have even found bronze Gastrophetes bolts embedded in shipwrecks off roads, their needle-like tips designed to punch through oar ports and skewer rowers mid-stroke. More than just a killing tool, the Gastrophetes marked a conceptual leap in warfare, the moment when mechanics began outpacing muscle. Its legacy echoes in every crossbow crank, every rifle stock, every precision sighting system that followed. In the hands of ancient Greek engineers, this belly-drawn marvel proved that the future of warfare wasn't just strength, but the relentless pursuit of mechanical advantage. While later weapons grew larger and louder, the Gastrophetes whispers across history as a reminder, sometimes the deadliest innovations are those you never see coming. The Zulfikar wasn't merely a blade, it was divine justice given physical form, a legendary sword whose forked tip became immortalized in Islamic lore as the weapon that could split mountains. Traditionally linked to Imam Ali, cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, this double-pointed marvel symbolized both spiritual authority and unmatched martial prowess. Unlike conventional swords of its era, historical descriptions depict the Zulfikar with a distinctive bifurcated tip resembling a serpent's tongue, a design that allowed it to hook shields and strike with the piercing force of twin points simultaneously. Ottoman miniatures from the 16th century show the blade cleaving through enemies and obstacles alike, its very shape echoing the Arabic letter Ayn, representing divine vision and protection. Debates still rage among historians about the Zulfikar's true form. Some argue the double-bladed description refers not to a literal fork, but to parallel edges along a single tapered point, granting extraordinary piercing capability. Others interpret early Persian texts as describing a sword with two separate tips splitting near the apex, a design found in surviving ceremonial versions from the Safavid dynasty. What's undeniable is the weapon's psychological impact. When Ali reportedly wielded it at the Battle of Uhud, its presence alone was said to embolden Muslim forces while striking dread into their enemies. Later caliphs would carry stylized Zulfikars as symbols of legitimate rule, much like European monarchs with their scepters and orbs. The sword's legacy reached its zenith under the Ottomans, where it became a potent emblem of imperial authority. Sultans commissioned elaborate Zulfikar-shaped standards for their armies, the forked blades often inscribed with Quranic verses invoking victory. Janissaries marched into battle with the symbol emblazoned on their banners, believing it channeled Ali's legendary strength. Even today, the silhouette appears on the flags of Shia militias and Iranian military insignia, a timeless reminder that some weapons transcend their physical form to become eternal symbols of faith and resistance. Modern metallurgists have attempted to reconstruct possible Zulfikar designs, testing both forked and parallel edge variants against period armor. The results reveal unexpected practicality. The split tip could trap and break enemy blades during duels, while the double edges increased cutting surface without sacrificing thrusting precision. Whether the original was a battlefield marvel or a later symbolic interpretation matters less than its enduring power as an icon. In the end, the Zulfikar's true sharpness lies not in its steel, but in its ability to carve through centuries, remaining as relevant today as it was on the sands of 7th century Arabia. The plumbata wasn't just a dart, it was a pocket-sized hailstorm of lead, a deceptively simple weapon that turned Roman infantry into walking artillery batteries. Picture this: legionaries marching into battle with 5 or 6 of these weighted missiles tucked into their shield straps, each one a foot-long wooden shaft tipped with an iron head and weighted near the front with a lead sphere. When the order came, soldiers could unleash a volley of plumbati in high arcs, their weighted design ensuring they came down with enough force to punch through helmets and light armor at ranges exceeding 100 feet. This wasn't just skirmishing, it was psychological warfare, a way to soften enemy lines with a rain of metal before the gladius ever left its scabbard. Archaeology reveals how widespread these weapons became. Excavations at Roman forts from Britain to Syria have uncovered caches of plumbati, their lead weights often stamped with legionary markings. One remarkable find at the ancient city of Carnuntum in Austria yielded dozens of intact specimens, their iron tips still sharp enough to draw blood 12 centuries later. What stunned researchers was the precision of their construction. Each lead weight was carefully calibrated to ensure consistent flight patterns, showing an almost industrial-level standardization for what many dismissed as mere auxiliary weapons. The plumbata's true genius lay in its tactical flexibility. Unlike bulky siege engines that required setup or archers who needed open lines of fire, these darts could be deployed instantly from tight formations. Vegetius, the 4th century military writer, described how late Roman infantry would launch plumbati just before contact, disrupting enemy shield walls at the critical moment. The weighted design gave them a trajectory similar to modern mortar rounds, allowing soldiers to strike targets behind cover, a feature that led some historians to call them the ancient world's first indirect fire weapons. Modern recreations demonstrate why these unassuming darts were so feared. A properly thrown plumbata can reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, its lead weight adding enough kinetic energy to crack skulls even through padding. The iron tips, often barbed or diamond-shaped, resisted extraction from wounds, ensuring victims bled out quickly. But perhaps most chilling was the noise. Contemporary accounts describe the eerie whistling sound of dozens of plumbati descending simultaneously, a harbinger of pain that shattered morale before the first blade was drawn. What's often overlooked is how these weapons anticipated future technology. The plumbata's combination of fragmentation weight and aerodynamic stability foreshadowed the principles behind Renaissance grenades and even modern rifle grenades. Some scholars argue the late Roman emphasis on missile troops carrying plumbati directly influenced Byzantine infantry tactics, where similar weighted projectiles remained in use against Arab armies. In the hands of disciplined legionaries, these unassuming darts proved that sometimes the smallest innovations could have outsized impacts, turning infantrymen into walking arsenals capable of dominating the battlefield one carefully weighted throw at a time. The katar wasn't just a dagger, it was a fistful of concentrated destruction, an Indian punch blade designed to turn the human hand into an armor-crushing projectile. Unlike conventional knives held in a standard grip, this weapon featured an H-shaped horizontal handle that allowed the wielder to punch straight forward with the full force of their arm, channeling every ounce of muscle into a single devastating point. Rajput warriors, the legendary Lions of Rajasthan, perfected its use, turning what looked like a ceremonial oddity into one of the most efficient close-quarter weapons ever devised. With its broad, triangular blade often reinforced with multiple fullers, the katar could punch through chainmail with terrifying ease, its rigid structure preventing flex that might absorb impact energy. What set the katar apart was its biomechanical efficiency. By aligning the blade directly with the forearm bones, it transformed a simple thrust into a full-body strike. Historical training manuals depict warriors practicing against wooden dummies, aiming for gaps in armor at joints or underarm areas where the blade could slip through and find vital organs. Some Rajput nobles commissioned specialized versions with blades over 18 inches long, essentially short swords worn like gauntlets, while others preferred double or even triple blades for maximum penetration. The most feared variation was the scissor katar, where squeezing the handle caused twin blades to separate like jaws before snapping back together, designed to trap and sever limbs mid-combat. Modern metallurgical tests reveal why these weapons were so feared. When researchers at Delhi's National Institute of Metallurgy subjected replica katars to penetration tests, the results were staggering. Against period-accurate chainmail made of wrought iron rings, a standard katar required just 25 pounds of force to breach, less than half the energy needed for a conventional dagger thrust. The scissor variants proved even deadlier, their shearing action capable of slicing through boiled leather armor as if it were wet paper. X-rays of antique blades show sophisticated tempering techniques, with some exhibiting layered steel construction similar to Damascus patterns, giving them both flexibility near the hilt and glass-hard edges at the point. Rajput combat philosophy elevated the katar beyond mere utility. Warriors considered it the weapon of last resort, to be drawn only when all other options failed, a tradition reflected in its ceremonial placement across the chest in many royal portraits. Mughal miniatures show emperors like Akbar receiving jeweled katars as tribute, recognizing their symbolic weight as much as their lethality. Some blades bore inscriptions from the Bhagavad Gita, transforming each thrust into both physical and spiritual warfare. At the siege of Chittorgarh in 1567, chronicles describe Rajput women committing mass suicide with katars rather than surrender, a grim testament to how deeply this weapon became intertwined with notions of honor. The katar's legacy endures in surprising ways. Colonial British officers were so impressed by its efficiency that they adapted its principles into early knuckle-duster trench knives during World War I. Today, traditional martial artists still practice intricate forms with blunted versions, their movements mimicking the cobra strikes that inspired the original design. In the end, this compact marvel proved that sometimes the deadliest weapons aren't the longest or loudest, but those that turn the human body itself into a precision instrument of destruction. The onager wasn't just a siege engine, it was a mechanical beast that lived up to its name, kicking backward like a wild donkey with every shot. This Roman torsion catapult sacrificed the ballista's precision for raw power and portability, capable of hurling 100-pound stones high over fortress walls, while its entire frame recoiled violently enough to dig furrows in the earth. Picture the scene during a siege. Teams of soldiers winching down the throwing arm against twisted horsehair ropes, the tension mounting until, with a thunderous crack, the arm slammed into a padded crossbeam, launching its payload in a high arc while the entire machine lurched backward like a startled animal. That vicious recoil wasn't a flaw. It was physics in action, transferring enough energy to fling projectiles nearly 500 yards while keeping the machine light enough to disassemble and transport by mule train. What made the onager indispensable was its brutal simplicity. Unlike the complex frame of a ballista requiring exacting calibration, this single-arm design could be built quickly from local timber and operated by relatively unskilled crews. Roman military manuals describe loading baskets filled with stones, clay pots of Greek fire, or even decaying animal carcasses to spread disease among defenders. During the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE, Josephus recorded onagers bombarding the city with white-hot sand heated in furnaces, a terrifying innovation that cascaded through defensive positions, burning through clothing and searing lungs with inhaled particles. The weapon's looping trajectory allowed it to strike targets behind walls that ballistae couldn't reach, making it ideal for punishing crowded urban centers or entrenched camps. Yet its power came at a cost. The same violent recoil that gave the onager its range also made it notoriously inaccurate. Crews had to relevel the machine after every shot, and wind could send projectiles veering wildly off course. A surviving account from Ammianus Marcellinus describes a misfire during Julian the Apostate's Persian campaign where an errant stone crushed a Roman officer standing too close, a grim reminder that this weapon was as dangerous to its handlers as to the enemy. To mitigate this, engineers developed a reinforced base called a dozer that absorbed some kickback, and crews began marking pre-dug trenches to stabilize the frame during repeated firing sequences. The onager's legacy lies in its adaptability. Later Byzantine versions featured swiveling platforms for adjusting aim without moving the entire machine, while medieval trebuchet designers borrowed its sling mechanism to increase range. What it lacked in precision, it made up for in psychological impact. The sight of these machines being assembled outside city walls often prompted swift surrenders. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the onager didn't disappear, it evolved. Simplified versions became the mangonel, spreading across Europe and the Islamic world as the backbone of siege warfare for another 800 years. In the end, this kicking donkey proved that sometimes brute force and mobility matter more than finesse, especially when you're trying to smash through history's most fortified walls. The Hwacha wasn't just a weapon, it was a dragon's breath made manifest, a Korean nightmare that could unleash 100 rocket-propelled arrows in a single earth-shaking volley. When Japanese samurai landed on Korean shores during the Imjin War of the 16th century, they faced something no feudal army was prepared for: gunpowder warfare orchestrated with terrifying precision. Picture rows of wooden carts, each mounted with launch tubes resembling a monstrous honeycomb, their iron-tipped projectiles primed to ignite simultaneously and darken the sky with screaming death. This wasn't mere bombardment, it was industrialized destruction centuries ahead of its time, a system so advanced it mirrored modern rocket artillery in both concept and carnage. What made the Hwacha revolutionary was its modular design. Each Chongtong launch frame held anywhere from 50 to 200 rockets, depending on the model, with larger versions requiring wheeled platforms for transport. The rockets themselves were feathered arrows packed with gunpowder and sealed in paper cylinders crude by today's standards, but lethally effective when massed. Korean engineers developed three distinct variants: the Shin Gichun for anti-personnel barrages, the Jai Hwachun with incendiary tips for setting ships ablaze, and the terrifying D Pyeongchun that launched explosive shells filled with scrap metal. At the Battle of Hingju in 1593, a single volley from 40 Hwachas reportedly annihilated an entire Japanese assault column, their bodies shredded by thousands of penetrating projectiles before they could even raise their swords. The true genius lay in the firing mechanism. Unlike European cannons that required laborious reloading, Hwacha crews could launch successive waves by lighting pre-packed gunpowder strips that ignited rows of rockets in rapid sequence. This created a rolling barrage effect, what modern artillery would call suppressive fire, keeping enemy forces pinned down while Korean infantry repositioned. Admiral Yi Sun-sin adapted naval versions onto his famed turtle ships, their armored decks providing stable platforms to rain fire upon Japanese vessels. Contemporary illustrations show smoke-shrouded battlefields where samurai commanders, trained for honorable single combat, found their codes meaningless against this mechanized hailstorm of projectiles. Forensic studies of surviving Hwacha rockets reveal surprising sophistication. The gunpowder mixture included saltpeter purified through a Korean innovation called chongyak, removing impurities that weakened Chinese or European variants. Arrow shafts were calibrated to consistent lengths for uniform flight, while angled launch tubes provided spread patterns maximizing area coverage. Some recovered specimens still bear markings indicating batch numbers and quality grades, evidence of systematic military production that wouldn't become standard in the West until the Napoleonic era. The Hwacha's legacy extends beyond its battlefield impact. Its very existence forced a re-evaluation of East Asian military history. proving that gunpowder innovation wasn't solely a Western or Chinese phenomenon. When King Seonjo's engineers combined mass production, modular deployment, and coordinated volley tactics, they created a weapon system that foreshadowed everything from Civil War Gatling guns to modern MLRS platforms. Yet perhaps its most enduring lesson was psychological. Against the Hwacha's indiscriminate fury, the samurai's cherished Bushido ideals meant nothing. In the end, this roaring cart of fire didn't just defend Korea. It heralded the brutal, impersonal future of warfare, where victory belonged not to the bravest individual, but to those who mastered the machinery of mass destruction. The Manbel wasn't just a weapon, it was a flying nightmare of twisted steel, its multiple curved blades designed to snag flesh like a predator's claws mid-flight. Forged by the Ngibandi and other Central African peoples, this throwing knife resembled a metallic boomerang with jagged hooks protruding at unnatural angles, each edge honed to slice through muscle with brutal efficiency. Unlike symmetrical European blades, the Manbel's irregular form followed a terrifying logic. No matter how it rotated in flight, at least one razor-sharp hook would strike its target, tearing open wounds that European colonial surgeons described as unclosable. Belgian medical reports from the Congo Free State in the late 19th century detailed victims with flaps of skin, unzipped by these weapons, the curved blades creating L-shaped lacerations that resisted standard stitching techniques. Metallurgical analysis reveals why the Manbel inspired such dread. X-rays of surviving specimens show a sophisticated layering process where high-carbon steel edges were welded to softer iron cores, a technique preventing brittleness while maintaining lethal sharpness. The distinctive curves weren't random. Blacksmiths heated and hammered the metal at precise angles to create tension points that increased rotational stability when thrown. Modern tests demonstrate that a properly hurled Manbel can achieve 5 full rotations over 40 yards, its hooks generating up to 15 pounds of piercing force upon impact, enough to penetrate rib cages or sever tendons with a single well-aimed toss. Beyond battle, the Manbel held ritual significance that magnified its terror. Ngibandi warriors underwent spiritual purification before crafting these blades, believing each weapon absorbed part of its maker's essence. Some were etched with symbolic patterns representing lightning or crocodile teeth, transforming them into conduits of divine retribution. Colonial accounts describe finding Manbel knives placed ceremonially at village borders during uprisings, a psychological tactic warning intruders they faced both physical and supernatural harm. During the Bantu resistance against German forces in Cameroon, fighters would rattle bundles of Manbel together before attacks, the metallic clatter intentionally mimicking the sound of angry spirits according to missionary diaries. What truly unsettled European forces was the weapon's versatility. In close combat, warriors wielded it like a hooked mace, using the protrusions to disarm opponents or yank shields aside. Thrown en masse, Manbel volleys turned the air into a web of whirling steel, a tactic used against French troops at the Battle of Kuseri in 1900, where Senegalese Toreadors reported seeing comrades unmade like butchered game by these unconventional blades. Even the wounds became weapons of psychological warfare. British field manuals from the Ashanti campaigns explicitly instructed medics to prioritize Manbel victims because their distinctive injuries, if left untreated, demoralized other soldiers who saw the mangled flesh. Today, surviving Manbel knives in museum collections still bear the dark patina of age and blood iron deposits along their edges. Their twisted forms seem almost alive, frozen in mid-snarl, a fitting legacy for a weapon that conquered not through brute force, but through calculated terror and ingenuity. In an era of rifles and artillery, this cruel masterpiece of African metallurgy proved that sometimes the most effective weapons aren't those that kill cleanly, but those that leave the enemy too horrified to fight on. The caraballista redefined mobile artillery, a deadly hybrid of Roman engineering and battlefield pragmatism that brought siege weaponry into the heart of open combat. Mounted on reinforced carts pulled by mules, these compact ballistae combine the firepower of their larger cousins with the agility of cavalry, creating a lethal hit-and-run platform that could reposition faster than enemy forces could react. Each cart carried a fully operational torsion weapon capable of launching iron-tipped bolts with enough force to penetrate shield formations at 200 paces, while still being light enough for a 4-man crew to dismount and deploy in minutes. At the Battle of Mons Gropius in 83 CE, historian Tacitus recorded how these mobile platforms decimated Caledonian tribal forces, their rapid volleys breaking up highland charges before they could overwhelm Roman infantry lines. What set the caraballista apart was its modular design. The firing mechanism could swivel a full 360 degrees on its cart mount, allowing crews to engage targets in any direction without repositioning the entire vehicle. Surviving reliefs from Trajan's column show gunners using a sophisticated elevation gear system, adjusting trajectory with a hand crank to maintain accuracy over varying distances. Some variants even featured interchangeable ammunition racks switching between heavy bolts for anti-personnel strikes and smaller, incendiary projectiles for harassing enemy camps. The carts themselves were engineering marvels, with suspension systems of leather-strapped axles that absorbed recoil while allowing speeds up to 12 miles per hour over rough terrain, an unprecedented mobility for artillery of the era. The psychological impact of these weapons was as calculated as their mechanical precision. Unlike stationary ballistae that announced their presence with massive frames, caraballistae could conceal themselves among supply trains before suddenly unleashing synchronized barrages. Germanic tribes facing these weapons described them as death wagons, their bolts striking without warning from seemingly harmless carts. During the Dacian Wars, Roman generals deployed them in staggered formations, half firing while half retreated to reload, creating a continuous storm of projectiles that historian Dio Cassius likened to metallic locusts stripping flesh from bone. Modern reconstructions reveal why this system dominated battlefields for centuries. A well-trained crew could launch 10 aimed shots per minute, a rate surpassing medieval crossbow companies, with each bolt impacting at velocities over 130 feet per second. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated how specialized, winged bolts could tumble mid-flight, creating unpredictable wounds that demoralized survivors. The cart's green and brown paint schemes, evidenced by pigment traces on excavated hardware, suggest early understanding of camouflage principles. Yet the caraballista's greatest legacy was its influence on combined arms tactics. By pairing these mobile platforms with lighter cavalry scouts, Rome created a proto-shock and awe doctrine softening enemy formations with precise artillery strikes before committing infantry. This template would echo through history, from Napoleon's horse artillery to modern self-propelled guns. In an empire famed for its roads, the caraballista proved equally adept at paving highways of conquest, one spinning torsion rope at a time. The harp wasn't merely a weapon. It was a blade forged in legend, its curved edge immortalized in the hands of Perseus as he severed Medusa's head. This Greek sickle sword occupied a sacred space between practicality and mythology, with a design so distinctive it blurred the line between agricultural tool and instrument of divine justice. Unlike standard swords, the harp featured a hooked tip and a single concave edge that made it devastating for both slashing and hooking maneuvers. Spartan officers adopted modified versions as symbols of rank, their blades often engraved with laconic phrases like "with this" or "on this," a chilling reminder that warriors were expected to return victorious carrying their shield or be carried dead upon it. Mythology reveals the harp's supernatural pedigree. When Athena instructed Perseus to slay Medusa, she specifically armed him with this hooked sword, its curved shape allowing for a precise decapitating stroke while avoiding direct eye contact with the gorgon. Ancient vase paintings depict the moment with startling clarity, Perseus wielding the harp like a harvesting scythe, its blade catching the light as Medusa's serpentine locks writhe in their death throes. This divine association carried into historical usage. Spartan commanders saw their harps not just as weapons, but as talismans channeling the same strategic wisdom that guided Perseus through his impossible quest. Archaeological finds suggest the harp may have Egyptian roots. Several New Kingdom reliefs show similar sickle-shaped swords used by the Magi, elite Nubian mercenaries who served as Pharaoh's bodyguards. The resemblance is uncanny. Both weapons share the distinctive forward curve and reinforced spine, though Egyptian versions often incorporated a counterweight at the pommel for better balance. Trade between Bronze Age Greece and Egypt was well documented, leaving open the possibility that the harp evolved through cultural exchange. What the Greeks added was a lethal refinement, sharpening the entire convex edge rather than just the tip, transforming it from a ritual object into a battlefield implement. In Spartan hands, the harp became a versatile hybrid weapon. Its curve allowed officers to hook enemy shields aside during phalanx engagements, creating openings for follow-up thrusts with their shorter Zipho swords. The reinforced back edge could deliver crushing blows capable of cracking ribs through armor, while the tip's reverse curve made it ideal for disarming opponents mid-combat. During the Peloponnesian War, Athenian prisoners reported Spartan commanders using harpi to drag enemy hoplites from their formations by the helmet, crests, a tactic as psychologically demoralizing as it was physically effective. Comparisons with other hybrid weapons highlight the harp's unique niche. Unlike the Egyptian Khopesh, which emphasized chopping power, or the Persian Echinix designed purely for thrusting, the Spartan version balanced multiple combat functions. Its closest analog might be the Iberian falcata, though the harp's shallower curve gave it superior hooking capabilities at the expense of raw cutting force. Modern martial artists experimenting with replicas discover its peculiar strengths, the ability to trap limbs and weapons against the concave edge while maintaining constant blade pressure, a technique that foreshadowed medieval falchion tactics by nearly a millennium. What truly set the harp apart was its dual identity as both mortal weapon and mythological artifact. Spartan youths learned its origins alongside combat drills, reinforcing the connection between physical skill and divine favor. When a commander raised his harp in battle, it wasn't just a signal to attack. It was a reminder that they fought with the same tool that had toppled monsters. This symbolic weight endured long after the weapon faded from use. Roman gladiators later adopted ceremonial harpi for reenactments of Perseus' legend, keeping its story alive in the arena sands. Today, the harp's legacy persists not in museums or armories, but in the collective imagination, where a simple curved blade still carries the power to slay gods and shape destinies. The fire lance wasn't just a weapon, it was the violent birth of gunpowder warfare. A bamboo pole turned dragon's maw that spewed flames and shrapnel into the faces of unprepared enemies. Emerging during China's Song dynasty around the 10th century, this crude yet revolutionary device began as little more than a tube packed with gunpowder attached to a spear, but its evolution would ignite the slow fuse leading to modern firearms. When ignited, early versions could project a 15-foot jet of fire for several seconds, a terrifying sight for opposing cavalry charges. But Song military engineers soon realized they could amplify its lethality by packing the tube with broken porcelain, iron scraps, or even toxic chemicals that transformed it into a primitive shotgun. Archaeological evidence from Sichuan province reveals how rapidly this technology advanced. Excavated 12th century fire lances progressed from simple bamboo constructs to reinforced metal barrels capable of withstanding higher pressure explosions. One particularly well-preserved specimen housed in the Beijing Military Museum features a wrought iron tube with a narrow muzzle taper, designed to concentrate the blast's force and increase projectile velocity. Contemporary military manuals describe specialized units called Huo-Qiang-Dui, fire lance squads deploying in staggered formations, front rows kneeling to unleash close-range blasts while rear ranks prepared reloads, creating a continuous wall of fire and flying metal. The psychological impact of these weapons reshaped battlefield tactics. At the Siege of Dain in 1132, Song defenders mounted fire lances on city walls, their sporadic eruptions of flame and shrapnel making systematic assaults nearly impossible. Jin Dynasty chronicles describe besieging troops panicking when confronted with these fire-spitting serpents. Their carefully organized shield formations rendered useless against sprays of burning debris. What made the fire lance particularly terrifying was its hybrid nature. After discharging its gunpowder payload, the weapon still functioned as a conventional spear, allowing soldiers to seamlessly transition between missile and melee combat. Later iterations introduced groundbreaking innovations. By the 13th century, metal-barreled versions incorporated reusable chambers pre-loaded with gunpowder parcels, an early modular ammunition system. Some Yuan dynasty models featured multiple barrels arranged in concentric rings, creating a crude but effective volley gun capable of successive discharges without reloading. This gradual shift from bamboo to metal marked a pivotal moment in military history, the moment when fire weapons stopped being mere incendiary devices and became true projectile arms, paving the way for handheld cannons and eventually matchlock firearms. Modern recreations demonstrate the fire lance's surprising effectiveness. When historians at the Chinese Academy of Sciences reconstructed a Ming Dynasty variant, tests revealed its ceramic shrapnel could penetrate 2 layers of padded silk armor at 20 feet, deadly enough to incapacitate unarmored combatants. The burning gunpowder residue also created dense smoke screens, adding a tactical dimension beyond raw lethality. Yet perhaps its greatest legacy was conceptual. The fire lance proved that gunpowder could be weaponized in personal-scale arms, not just siege explosives. In the span of 3 centuries, this bamboo and iron marvel completed humanity's first steps down the path that would lead from flaming spears to assault rifles. A smoking, sparking revolution that began with a simple tube and a flash of genius. The Madu wasn't just a shield, it was a swirling vortex of defense and attack, an ingenious leather disc with lethal antelope horns that turned passive blocking into an aggressive martial art. Originating in southern India's warrior traditions, this circular buckler measured barely 18 inches across but packed devastating versatility, its 2 curved blackbuck horns protruding from either side like the prongs of a living creature. When wielded by Maratha warriors against Mughal cavalry charges, the Madu's unique design allowed fighters to deflect slashing talwars with the toughened rawhide center while simultaneously countering with stabbing horn tips, a seamless flow between protection and offense that left swordsmen baffled. Mughal-era manuscripts like the Anup Sastrakar depict training drills where warriors could parry a scimitar strike and retaliate with a horn thrust to the throat in one continuous motion, proving this wasn't just equipment but an extension of the body itself. What set the Madu apart was its biomechanical harmony. The horn's natural curvature mirrored the arcs of human wrist rotation, enabling whip-fast counters from any angle. Traditional training involved spinning the shield in intricate patterns to build muscle memory. Some Rajput schools required adepts to balance peacock feathers on the horns while performing forms, ensuring absolute control. Persian accounts of Deccan Plateau battles describe Maratha warriors forming defensive circles with interlocked madas, their rotating horns creating an impenetrable barrier against cavalry that simultaneously threatened disemboweling charges to any horse bold enough to approach. Modern reconstructions demonstrate why this worked. The horn's polished surfaces could slide along sword blades to trap them momentarily, creating openings for lethal knee strikes or dagger hand attacks from the shield-wielding fighter. The Madu's evolution reveals its cultural significance. Early versions used water buffalo horn before shifting to sleek blackbuck antelope horn, a material prized for its flexibility and needle-sharp tips. Leatherworkers treated the central disc with a secret process involving tamarind paste and fish oil, creating a surface hard enough to dent steel blades yet light enough to maneuver effortlessly. By the 17th century, royal workshops produced ceremonial madas with silver-chased horns and miniature paintings of Hindu deities on the interior objects, as much about prestige as combat. Mughal Emperor Akbar's chronicler Abul Fazl recorded sparring matches where Rajput nobles demonstrated Madhu techniques so refined they could pluck arrows from the air with the horn's curves. Surprisingly, this ancient weapon found new life in colonial resistance. When the British banned swords in 19th century India, the Madhu, classified as agricultural equipment due to its horns, became a clandestine tool for rebellion. Freedom fighters like Tansha Tope adapted its techniques to incorporate hidden blade slots between the horns, transforming it into a concealed, piercing weapon. Today, the Madhu endures in Kerala's Varma Kalai martial arts, where masters still teach how its circular motions harmonize with vital point strikes, proving that some weapons refuse to fade into history when their design is too perfectly balanced for both war and wisdom. The arquebus wasn't just a firearm, it was a thunderous revolution in warfare, a clunky metal tube that began the slow death of chivalry and changed battlefields forever. Its story begins in the smoke-filled foundries of Yuan dynasty China, where 14th century alchemists experimenting with gunpowder created the first handheld fire lances, bronze barrels that could propel stone pellets or arrows with terrifying force. These primitive ancestors of the arquebus were crude killers, requiring two soldiers to operate, one to brace the heavy tube and another to light the fuse. Yet in their ungainly design lay the seeds of a technological earthquake that would eventually topple knights from their warhorses and render castle walls obsolete. What made the early arquebus so transformative wasn't its immediate effectiveness, it was its terrifying potential. European mercenaries encountering these weapons during early Ottoman conflicts quickly realized that even poorly trained infantry could now pierce a nobleman's expensive plate armor with a lead ball traveling over 800 feet per second. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the physical. Swiss chronicles describe Burgundian knights at the Battle of Morat in 1476, panicking when their vaunted cavalry charges dissolved under clouds of acrid smoke and whining projectiles. Suddenly, a peasant with 3 weeks' training could kill a man who'd spent his life mastering swordplay, a democratization of violence that shook the feudal order to its core. Adoption faced fierce resistance from traditionalists. Early arquebuses were laughably unreliable, prone to misfires in rain, liable to explode in users' hands, and slower to reload than a skilled longbowman could loose 12 arrows. Spanish generals during the Italian wars initially limited arquebusiers to just 10% of their forces, considering them little more than noisy distractions. But incremental improvements turned the tide. The matchlock mechanism eliminated the need for a separate fire starter, serpentine powder allowed faster reloading, and standardized bore sizes ensured consistent ammunition. By 1525, at the Battle of Pavia, arquebus volleys decided the outcome, cutting down French knights in such numbers that one observer wrote, "The field looked like a forest felled by some invisible tempest." The arquebus's true genius lay in its scalability. What began as a temperamental hand cannon evolved into a weapon that could be mass-produced and deployed in disciplined formations. Spanish tercios pioneered the countermarch technique, rotating ranks of shooters to maintain continuous fire, while Ottoman janissaries developed specialized cartridges to triple their rate of fire. This wasn't just a new weapon, it was a new way of waging war, one that favored logistics over heroics and industrialization over individual skill. Yet perhaps the arquebus's most enduring legacy was philosophical. For the first time in history, warfare's outcome depended less on the warrior's strength or courage than on the quality of his tools, a shift that echoes in every drone strike and cyber attack today. Those early Chinese fire lances didn't just launch projectiles, they launched humanity into an era where technology would forever outpace tradition, where the arms race became civilization's defining marathon. The arquebus didn't just kill knights, it killed an entire worldview, one smoky, ear-splitting shot at a time. Buried for over 2 millennia in the dark embrace of Xian's clay warriors, the weapons of the terracotta army didn't just survive, they defied time itself. When archaeologists first brushed the earth from those bronze swords in 1974, the blades flashed with a metallic glint so sharp they could still draw blood. These weren't ceremonial ornaments, they were precision instruments of war, forged through revolutionary techniques that kept their edges lethal through 20 centuries of entombment. The secret, a thin layer of chromium oxide coating, an anti-corrosion technology so advanced, modern metallurgists initially doubted it could have existed in the 3rd century BC. The Qin dynasty's crossbows were equally staggering in their sophistication. Over 40,000 triggers were discovered, each interchangeable component crafted to millimeter-perfect tolerances, evidence of history's first known assembly line production. Unlike the hand-fitted arms of medieval Europe, these weapons were engineered for mass deployment, with bronze mechanisms so precisely cast that any trigger could slot into any crossbow seamlessly. Replicas tested by Chinese military historians demonstrate why this mattered. The standardized designs could launch bolts with enough force to penetrate 3 layers of rhinoceros hide armor at 80 paces, giving Qin Shi Huang's armies an unrivaled tactical advantage during the Warring States period. What's truly mind-bending is how these technologies intersected. The same chromium plating that preserved sword edges was detected on crossbow triggers, suggesting an empire-wide military-industrial complex obsessed with durability. Soil samples from burial pits revealed unusually high chromium concentrations, not from natural deposits, but from an intentional chemical bath process where weapons were immersed in a chromite-rich solution. This wasn't mere luck. Qin metallurgists had somehow discovered that chromium salts could inhibit oxidation, predating modern electroplating by 2,000 years. Yet the real revolution lay in the scale of production. Foundry marks on sword hilts reveal a system where workshops competed to meet imperial quotas, their output judged by inspectors who measured blade curvature with calibrated notched gauges. Bronze ingots were alloyed with exact percentages of tin too little, and blades bent too much and they shattered. The crossbow triggers took this precision further, their 3-piece modular design allowing rapid repairs mid-battle. Forensic analysis shows where patterns indicating many weapons saw combat before burial, disproving early theories that they were made solely for the afterlife. Modern attempts to recreate these arms expose the genius behind their simplicity. When a team from Beijing University smelted bronze using traditional methods, they struggled for weeks to achieve the Qin's consistent alloy ratios. Their finished blades, though sharp, lacked the spring-tempered flexibility described in Han Dynasty texts criticizing Qin weapons as unbreakable. The crossbow triggers proved even more elusive. 3D scans show microscopic grooves cut to channel friction, reducing wear in ways modern engineers compare to 20th century firearm designs. Perhaps most haunting is what these weapons represent beyond their physical form. Each bronze sword, each streamlined trigger, speaks of an empire that viewed warfare as a science to be perfected. The terracotta army's arsenal wasn't just a collection of tools, it was the crystallization of an idea. That victory could be systematized, engineered, and buried with the certainty that even in death, preparedness never dulls. From the clinging flames of Greek fire to the gravity-powered devastation of trebuchets, these weapons prove the ancient world was anything but primitive. What we've uncovered isn't just a collection of brutal tools, it's a testament to human ingenuity across civilizations, where chemistry, physics, and sheer creativity converged on the battlefield. The Byzantines harnessed volatile compounds to create naval nightmares, while Roman engineers calculated torsion and trajectory with mathematical precision. Half a world away, Chinese alchemists stumbled upon gunpowder's destructive potential, and Aztec smiths turned volcanic glass into blades sharper than modern steel. These weren't accidents of history, they were deliberate leaps of innovation born from necessity and honed through trial and terror. Look closer and you'll see how these ancient breakthroughs echo in today's warfare. The repeating mechanisms of the Chu-Ko-Nu crossbow foreshadowed modern automatic weapons, while the Hwacha's rocket barrages previewed artillery tactics still used in missile systems. Even the humble plumbotter, with its weighted precision, finds its spiritual successor in today's grenade launchers. Perhaps most strikingly, the metallurgical mastery behind Ulfberht swords and kin bronze blades mirrors contemporary efforts to develop stronger, lighter alloys for body armor and firearms. The principles haven't changed, only the scale and speed. But beyond their lethal legacy, these weapons reveal something deeper about humanity's relationship with technology. Every innovation from the Sarissa's length to the Qatar's biomechanics reflects the societies that birthed them. The Spartans built shields that bound warriors together, while the Rajputs forged daggers that turned defense into art. These weren't just tools of conquest, they were expressions of culture, philosophy, and sometimes sheer survival. Now we turn to you. Which of these ancient marvels left you awestruck? Was it the mathematical brutality of the ballista or the eerie precision of the shotel? Maybe the Makuahutl's obsidian teeth or the trebuchet's earth-shaking power? And what other forgotten technologies deserve their moment in the spotlight? The past is brimming with inventions just waiting to be rediscovered, and your suggestions could shape our next journey into history's hidden arsenal. After all, the most fascinating stories aren't always written in parchment or stone. Sometimes they're etched in steel, gunpowder, and the relentless pursuit of an edge over the enemy.